Well, hi, hello, and welcome to Navigating M-21-31 Compliance with Gigamon. Now, today's webinar is sponsored by Gigamon and produced by Actual Tech Media, and my name is Jess Steinbach. I'm with Actual Tech Media, and I'm so happy that I get to be your moderator for this conversation because, hey, I know that compliance is no one's favorite thing. Well, not many people's favorite thing, right? But it is so important, and those deadlines are very real. So, just like taxes, if we have to do it, we might as well do it right. We might as well get the most out of it that we possibly can and make sure we're just nailing that checklist. So, this practically focused conversation is going to help you get those hard tips, best practices, and important information about how you can capture, manage, and retain logging and data and be sure that you are meeting M-21-31 compliance. And here's the really cool part, because not only are you going to learn all this great stuff, you are going to have some fun while you do it, right? Because we have some awesome and informative speakers here with us today from Gigamon who are going to put the good times back into compliance planning, I promise you. We are going to get things started in just a few minutes here, but I want to go through a few of those housekeeping points to help you get the most out of your time with us here today. So first, I want to draw your attention over to the questions section of your webinar console. Now, this is the best place to get involved, get interactive, and post all of those insightful questions, your comments, your feedback, your ideas. I know with compliance, you have a lot of specific questions that are going to be important to your organization. So if you have that burning question that's been rolling around in your brain for a little while, today is the day to get it out. So be sure you get that into the questions window. Now, you can give that a little test run right now. Say hi, say hello, give a wave to the community here with us. Let us know how you're doing today. And I do also want to let you know that that questions window is going to be the best place to reach out and let us know if you have any technical issues that come up during the session. I want to remind you that a browser refresh is going to clear up most of the more common things, slide issues, audio, anything like that. But if that's not working for you, you can shoot us a message in that questions window and the Actual Tech Media crew will be there to help you out. All right, the last thing I want to point out on your audience console is the handouts tab. Please do go spend some time exploring those resources and follow-ups to our conversation here today. There is going to be so much that we're going to cover, and you're going to want to retain all of it, and you'll retain quite a bit of it, but we all know that we lose a little bit when we try to remember these wonderful webinars later, right? So that handouts tab is the best way to call that information back, to go back through it and jog all those wonderful points that we're going to get from our speakers today. And if all of that cool content wasn't enough to get you pumped up about our webinar here together today, we also have a $250 Amazon gift card as a prize drawing. We're going to give that away at the end of our session. So you do need to be here in live attendance during the webinar in order to win that prize, and all winners must meet the Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions. If you're not sure what those are, no problem. We don't expect you to have those memorized. We have them stored for you right there in the handouts tab. So you can click on over, scroll down to the bottom, and you'll find the full T's and C's waiting for you there. All right, well, that is it for the housekeeping. I think it's about time that we get into our session here. So let's get this conversation rolling. Now, today, I am so excited to introduce you all to our expert presenters. We have here with us the one and only Stephen Goudreau, Cloud Security Evangelist at Gigamon, and Matthew Hollinsworth, Senior Sales Engineer at Gigamon. What a dynamic duo, Steve and Matthew. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Now, I know you have a lot of info to cover. We've got a lot of those really practical and helpful insights in store. So I want to make sure that we leave some time for questions. We got a lot to do. So Steve, I'm going to step back. I'm going to hand things on over to you. Take it away, Steve.
Hello, my name is Steve Goodrow. I'm here with Matthew Hollingsworth, and we're going to discuss navigating M-21-31 compliance. So a brief agenda, what we're going to cover is understanding some of the M-21-31 requirements, where Gigamon can help, how they can help, some recommendations, and some next steps. A little introduction. My name is Stephen Goodrow. I'm a cloud security evangelist here at Gigamon. I have almost 30 years experience in IT, and that sounds terrible when you say it that way. I worked for over 11 years at Tipping Point, where I did a lot of deep packet inspection, network performance testing, network level evasions was kind of my specialty. So I'm a bit of a packet nerd. So getting into the M-21-31 compliance requirements. So there's a number of levels and deadlines. We're not really going to focus on that. We're going to focus more on some of the network level requirements. Now, we understand this is a journey, and some orgs will find some of these requirements easier to achieve than other. Um, and within these network requirements, we're probably only going to really focus on 4 or 5 big ones. We're not going to try to cover every possible combination, simply because of the time we have, and talking about logging for many hours, isn't the most exciting thing. So understanding the network requirements. So on the network flow logs is a requirement, but why network flow logs, right? It's very easy to grab logging off endpoints. However, a compromised endpoint may not log properly. An endpoint under load may sacrifice logging for performance. IoT devices may not have any kind of logging capability at all, and you can't really install an endpoint agent on them. So, as an example of IoT, that badge reader you used this morning to badge into the building, that's running some kind of Linux distro. It was never designed to log traffic, and it has very limited space to do so. And you really don't realize how much IoT you have in the network until you're forced to do a network closet upgrade, and all of those devices don't come back, and you have to go find them and reset them, and it can be quite taxing. Encrypted traffic. So one of the requirements is to log and record encrypted conversations in plain text. There's the classic method of doing inline TLS with certificates. This requirement also extends to virtual environments where the classic decrypt methods don't really work. We're going to spend a little bit of time looking at that. Virtual machine and container traffic. So as cloud adoption grows, both on-prem and in the public cloud, the logging requirements do not go away. Container environments do not lend themselves well to network logging. Layer in the decrypt requirement, and this can seem like quite the impossible problem. Active and passive DNS is specifically called out. All DNS entries should be recorded. Active DNS refers to logs from the DNS server. Passive DNS would be DNS traffic observed on the wire. Now, there's a number of reasons why you would want both. If a DNS server is compromised, it may not record the data. Plus, there's the performance hit of doing that. The nature of DNS traffic, it's small, fast conversations, and they'll fill up a log very quickly. Also, your on-prem DNS server may not be the target of the DNS query. So if a compromised workload or shadow IT is sending their DNS out of the organization, it won't be recorded that way. DHCP is a requirement. This is a wonderful way to capture information on workloads as they come online. This can be difficult to observe depending on where in the network you're looking. Now, one of the more difficult ones is going to be the log and data retention. So one of the requirements is 72 hours of full PCAP traffic in plain text, if possible, along with 12 months of active storage and 18 months of cold storage. In such an ideal situation, it seems you'd be overwhelmed in information that's not honestly that interesting, right? Or it's very prolific, but it may not have specifically what you're looking for. So understanding where Gigamon helps to meet with these network requirements. So network flow logs, we have a lot to offer here. First and foremost, we create logs in parallel to routers and switches, other network appliances, and workloads. With the recent router firmware replacement attacks, suspicious traffic may not be logged. Additionally, I'm sure as all admins have seen, when devices are under load, logging is usually the first thing sacrificed. Also, there's limited space for logging, and if logs start to roll over, that information can be lost. One of the key differentiators with Gigamon is when we do this logging, we also we do deep packet inspection on it. This means we can assign protocols and applications to this network traffic. Now our log and we can enhance both classic network logging and some of the workload logging. So not only do we see this as a port 443 conversation, we can also record the web URL, certificate information, encryption strength, and a whole lot of other information. Additionally, what if that port 443 conversation turns out to not be TLS traffic? Well, if that's the case, we can solve for the non-standard port use case, which classic network logging is pretty blind to. Encryption is a bit of a paradox, right? We're trying to solve for an unsolvable problem. There's the classic method of inline decrypt with certificates, with the break and inspect, but we also have the industry's first broadly available and usable decryption for virtual environments. No key management is needed, no big stacks of compute to do the decrypt, and this works both on-prem and in the public cloud. So with virtual VM and container traffic, we can capture both virtual and container traffic. If it's in the private cloud, we usually do this by tapping the vSwitch. In the public cloud or in a container, we do this by mirroring the traffic off the workload and then doing deep packet inspection on it. For decryption, or for pre-encryption, we can mirror the traffic before it hits the open SSL library. So message integrity is maintained, but confidentiality is not in CISSP terms. One of the benefits of having Gigamon doing the hybrid cloud logging is the fact that you don't need to backhaul the cloud logs. This logging can create a unified view of all traffic, both on-prem and in the public cloud, because logging usually stops at administrative or technical boundaries. For example, on-prem logging stops on-prem, public cloud logging or Amazon logging stops at Amazon. Tying those conversations together can be challenging. This reduces the complexity of log storage. It also reduces the number of groups needed whenever there's an incident or logs need to be reviewed. So I really like our passive DNS solution. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it based on time constraints, but one of the things you should know is that we can see DNS on the wire and record it, and this doesn't put any additional load on your DNS server. The same goes with DHCP. I'm not going to spend that much time on it. As a packet broker, we are uniquely positioned in the network to see many broadcast domains, which we can capture DNS requests along with every possible option and then append that metadata to the log, all done passively. Now, focusing a little bit on the log and data attention requirements. So another area that we can uniquely aid is in this in the packet capture. We can mirror traffic directly to a rolling capture or repository of some kind, and all of this is done without load on a network device. We can also do the decryption as it's being written to the repository. Additionally, we can truncate the flows by removing payloads or slicing rest of the conversation out, which can considerably reduce storage space. And we feel that that's unique to, or someplace we can greatly add. So I want to talk about why M-21-31. If you're a bit like me, I know we need to check the box, but I always want to know why we need to check the box, right? And one of the problems that has been in the industry and in forensics reports is when there's a breach and investigative agencies show up and the FBI shows up, there wasn't a common data set that could consistently be used in investigations. Traffic was either too broad or was incomplete, or it didn't focus on the right area. So the White House had a mandate, M-21-31, and this is to get orgs aligned around a common data set. Now, this is an unfunded mandate, which means we need to kind of figure out how to do it with leverage tools we have or find tools that have the best bang for the buck. But again, the idea here is to get orgs aligned around common data sets so it's easier to move forward in the future. And if you've ever worked network operations or operations of any kind, if all your closets are identical in some way, it really makes things a lot easier. So how does Gigamon make all this possible? Well, joining me here is Matthew. And Matthew, so I'd like to ask you a few questions.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So do logging requirements cover flow and network logs?
Yeah. In fact, that's one of the things I found most exciting about the OMB M21-31 materials is that they were making a nod that it's not just logs. A log for me is a machine talking about what's happening in the machine from the machine's perspective. But they included what they would call flow logs, which for me usually means net flow. But now that we have cloudy types of things, it's really the flow log, right? You can get that from a packet capture device. You can get that from NetFlow and other mechanisms, and you can put it anywhere in any other format. So think NetFlow, but it means more than that. Um, and also, what I found really fascinating is that they consider the actual capture of the raw packet to be a form of log. So don't let the word log confuse you. It's actually including network telemetry and network raw packets. And the reason why I feel that M21-31 in a zero trust type of paradigm is, I think, acknowledging that why would we trust a machine to tell us what's happening with that machine? Why would we do that? Why would we trust that? Because the machine is really just responding to a program. Okay, I'm going to say this. And now, are you writing that program or did some malware actor do it? And then, of course, Stephen, you mentioned it before. There are so many things that are not going to get logged because we don't know they're there, shadow IT, or there's something malicious, or it's a heart monitor, and we just simply can't put anything on it because it's still running the Windows NT operating system. So there's a lot of really good reasons to use the network as a form of log to check and validate and provide different and more rich, unique information than what a basic machine log can provide.
I worked in a hospital for a few years, and that's where I did a lot of the network closet upgrades. And I accidentally knocked down the pharmacy's drug dispensing machine because it was IoT during the upgrade, because it only ran 10 meg half duplex, and trying
Yeah.
to figure that out in the router logs was difficult. But eventually we found it. So
Oh, I actually got a panicked phone call from somebody in a hospital because they were going through a ransomware attack and for some of the machines that were life-saving machines. It was a pretty intense scenario.
that is something I do want to cover here at the end of that, and that's shining a spotlight on the threat adversaries we all face, because they're coming after us. But we'll get to that in a little bit. So, how can customers access encrypted traffic with Gigamon?
That's a good question. You alluded to it. We have many different ways of doing it. We can go inline and get some of the ephemeral protocols, perfect word secrecy, Diffie Hellman, etc., by becoming part of the infrastructure. And I think a strong suit of Gigamon is that we also can get the traffic that's rattling around inside the networks that are using standard encryption. We can do that with a simple license key and just passively receive that if we have the private keys. But more importantly, as networks are evolving, so the critical assets are moving into cloudy environments, we have a way of taking data we're actually not decrypting the data or re-encrypting the data. We're getting it inside the workload, clear text, which is a very easy and phenomenal way to get that type of data. And I would say that it's even more important in the future as I mean, we just, I learned recently that we've have a technology with quantum computers for stabilizing qubits. So people are going to be able to crack this. You can buy quantum computers out there, D-Wave, right? It's going to get crazy. And so what that means is the computational algorithms that we're going to have to apply to our encryption are going to be much stronger and more intense. So Gigamon's actually bypassing that whole process. All that computational load will be handled in a distributed manner in all the workloads, and we're just taking advantage of that and taking that traffic. So I think that if you're really looking at decrypting, move towards the future and go into the cloud. That's where everything's going anyway, and get it there because it's going to be easier and more elegant and more powerful.
Well, it's the most cloudy of solutions, right? We took a big stack of compute and we kind of pushed it out amongst the workloads to do the decrypt or the pre-crypt there,
Right.
right? So, and it solves all the key management problems. It doesn't matter what level of encryption you have. It's a very elegant, reimagined solution to the current high friction decrypt, which I've run it. I don't know if you run it. It's a headache, right?
And let's be real too. When you're providing packet data to analytic devices in the clear, you're going to find approximately 7 more times the amount of threats than you would if you were just doing heuristics on encrypted traffic. So checking that box is really important for doing a good job.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And with the current decrypt solutions, you're only going to decrypt what you're looking for. And you have to know
Right. The
what you're
current
looking
decrypt
for.
solutions, it's mostly gateway in and out.
Right.
And our solution is going to handle all the east and west and inside rattling around. And that's where they hide, right? So if it's dark, they're going to hide there. So it's really important to turn the lights on.
So how can Gigamon access container traffic, or how can a customer access container traffic with Gigamon?
Well, the same license that we have for cloud that would handle on-premise, VMware, Nutanix, and public cloud, Amazon Web Services, and Google Cloud, for example, we have a technology that works with containers in the same way, running as a pod. So we can see the containers popping into existence and disappearing, talking to each other, and in and out. It's really the same type of technology.
So I find that when you talk packet brokers to cloud ops, they're like, wow, that's a layer 2 device. We don't need anything with that because there's no layer 2 in the public cloud. However, conceptually, we do the same thing. We mirror and duplicate traffic, right, from those workloads. So conceptually, it's similar. It's just it's executed very differently based on the cloud environment. We talked about this a little bit, but the data retention requirements seem quite egregious to most organizations. They probably don't have stacks and stacks of disk arrays lying around to store this.
Well, some of them do, but it's never enough. I used to be in that world for a while, and it's never enough. And what we're doing is usually the packet capture is a northbound southbound type of capture, and it's a really difficult problem. And now with M-21-31, there is an idea that we're going to do this everywhere, back and forth. For Gigamon, we have multiple technologies for doing that. We can select traffic in a normal way. We have application filtering intelligence. And we also have something called flow slicing. Application filtering intelligence, what I really loved about that, I actually had a problem that I was helping a customer solve in a big health organization. And their packet capture devices were running out of time and crashing. And when we put Gigamon on there, what this does is it flips the conversation, right? We found out it was Windows Update. So before, this group, when they were handing their packets off to other technologies, they would always ask, so what do you want? And the customer, their customer would always say, well, of course I want everything. And then they have to live with the crashing and the not enough time. So now they were able to ask that customer, do you really need 35% of the network traffic Windows Update that's happening right now? No, I really don't need that. Great. Do you need the backup traffic? Nope, don't need that. So it flips the conversation and turns it into a really easy operational tuning exercise so you can get that traffic down in a managed way. The brute force fire and forget way, which is really great, is flow slicing. So if you imagine let's say I'm having I'm recording a video with Steven, and he talks a lot, and so do I, and it's really long. But we only really care about what's happening here, right? To make sure that the software isn't compromised and is doing strange things. We can set an amount, right? I only want the first 1,000 packets, and then I'm going to drop everything. So I can still get everything. I can still find out what I need. To tell the security story, um, but I can drop the traffic by. I mean, I've seen it happen up around 80%. So instead of being able to capture for a couple days, maybe I can do a month, or maybe I have a system that's barely keeping up with north and south. But because this is not a funded requirement, instead of buying a bunch of refrigerator-sized hard drive racks, then I turn on flow slicing, and now I can capture east and west inside VMware, inside my physical container environment, um, and make it work. So we have all sorts of different ways of handling retention, and it's probably one of the most powerful use cases for Gigamon and M21-31.
That's super interesting, like to not have to capture all traffic like backup and Windows Update, because you don't think about that until you're confronted with it, right? And with most deep packet inspection engines, I only know of one that will inspect the entire length of the conversation. Most of them stop after the first megabyte.
And think of this in terms of cloud costs, right? Because everything in the cloud costs money, storage and whatnot. So, we're working with packet capture vendors in the cloud to solve that problem.
Yeah, and the cloud is kind of like IKEA cheap. Everything's a nickel. You just need 10,000 of it to do anything. So those costs add up pretty quick. Do you see M21-31 as a building block for Zero Trust? And if so, how?
Oh, absolutely. So one of the paradigms of Zero Trust, it moves away from what we used to do, putting access control lists on things, having firewalls, allowing this or that. And maybe we had some context around businesses and maybe a little bit of identity, and turned it into well, we're not going to trust anything. And we are acknowledging that every second or every minute of time is different than before, which requires data and telemetry to be fed into the Zero Trust ecosystem that's being adopted. This is not one technology. Nobody can check that box and say we're going to solve all your Zero Trust problems. It's a way of doing things. It's more of a lifestyle. So having access to the network in terms of packets and flows, logs, from agents on machines, all these different types of data sources are moving into devices that are analyzing it. As we get more into artificial intelligence and using standard SIM use cases and data mining, we're constantly ingesting this data and crunching it, and then making decisions based on it, changing somebody's risk score as a personality. They're doing strange things. Maybe we shouldn't let them do this. That's all going to get more sophisticated over time, but it requires a rich set of data that can't be altered and manipulated. So yes, I really do think that this was intentionally set up as a building block for a larger Zero Trust story.
And
100%.
To do that, this is
the
kind of
visibility tier, right, under the CISA framework model with the pillars. That's a foundational layer of everything.
Yeah, I'm going to say this a lot. It's getting orgs aligned around a common data set, and having a common data set is your first step to having good visibility and AI. And I've been doing a lot of Zero Trust work, and I prefer the DoD model myself, but everyone has favorites. So,
Fair.
So recommendations is this is going to be interesting because I did a lot of work in the past in cybersecurity, in deep packet inspection, in threat detection. And I had a whole stack of firewalls and routers and switches and devices and IPSs, and I would routinely launch attacks. And then I'd go in the logs to see if I could figure out what I did. And more often than not, I couldn't. And if you have a little bit of spare time and you want to figure out where your gaps are, because everyone has spare time, right, is why don't you navigate the entirety of your network and then see if you can piece that together with the logs you have now. it's a really good way to figure out if there's a visibility gaps and we're going, oh, I don't know where I was in the network between these 2 points. So clearly we're missing some kind of visibility. It's an easy way to like solve like the 80-20 problem, get at least 80% of the way there. And to do that, just think like an attacker. How would an attacker act? Could you detect that, right? And the goal is compliance. But and here's why I wanted to take a minute to talk about the threat actors in the industry. There are state-sponsored threat actors that are allowed to operate openly, whose stated goals are aligned with the state to degrade us and our institutions in any way possible. That's why they can openly hit hospitals because they're vulnerable with IoT, and no one back home is going to stop them or arrest them. And they're making a lot of money doing it. And, something happened a couple of years ago, a particular armed conflict in Europe. Overnight, how those threat actors were responding changed in relation to that event. They were practicing their attacks on us and charging us to do so. So keep that in mind. We're not just trying to check the box. We're trying to solve a real problem because there's real bad guys and threat actors out there. And one of the other takeaways is logging from an appliance has a cost. If you can do some of the logging with a tool like Gigamon, it doesn't put load on the appliance or the endpoint. Do we have any questions, Jess?
We absolutely do. So many questions coming in. You guys are really rocking this. I was thinking, Matthew, when you were talking about, if Steve and I were making a video and we only wanted 1,000 packets and we could go, and I was like, yeah, keep going. I want all the packets. This is great.
You can't handle all the packets.
You can't handle the packets.
You can't handle the packets. That's funny.
Amazing. Solid. Okay, we had to sneak in some references. We were talking Star Wars and we were warming up for the webinar. So yeah, now we're going in a different direction. I like it. Okay, so we're going to get into some audience questions here before we can go too far off the rails. And I want to start with this one here because I think we've got some folks in the audience who would really like to learn a little bit more. They're ready to kind of jump in. And so wondering if you could give some information on kind of a good way to learn more. And specifically, one of our audience members is looking for documents that are going to help them understand how Gigamon will help with M-21-31. Anything that you would direct them to specifically?
We just published a PDF. There should be a link to it somewhere in this presentation. And, M-21-31 is at its heart a logging requirement, right? So it is a bit tactical. It's a bit dry, but we're going to help you check that box. And we have a document that lays that out. That'd be way more interesting or to the point than us telling you here.
Solidly disagree, but also read the document for sure. Both. Tag team. Yes. And we do have that for you in the handouts tab. So go click on the handouts tab and grab that. All right, let's try this question here. Do you work with channel partners for implementing any of these various solutions?
We do. We work with most channel partners. At the end of the day, Gigamon is plumbing, right? And plumbing is best installed by a professional. Of course, anyone can go buy it and do it themselves, but having a channel partner who's well-versed in the technology can help you with that. What is your take on that, Matthew?
I like to use the analogy of, we're like a nervous system that attaches to a brain and someone else is the brain, but
your nervous system comment's much more elegant than my plumbing comment. So I should probably up-level that a little bit.
Yes,
it depends on your audience.
It's important to have a wide variety of metaphors that you can draw from. So from plumbing to nervous system.
It should depend on your mood.
Depending on where you're at in your day, you might feel more like plumbing or nervous system. One of the things I was thinking about when I was reading that question from our audience, looking for the documentation, was that a lot of times we see folks writing in and asking for, hey, I have to, make a pitch to decision makers in my team, or I need to carry this information forward to somebody. So if you were going to give sort of the kind of key ROI or argument to make to a decision maker, what would you say? Why Gigamon?
So it depends on the persona in question. I break that up
Mhm.
into net ops, cloud ops, and security ops because they're interested in three very different things.
Fair.
For network
Hmm.
operations, it's mean time to innocence. We can help you show it's not your problem. Performance wise, right? We can show
Mm.
you where in the network the slowdown is. If it's cloud operations, again, it's very similar. We can tell you where the slowdown in the public cloud is. There's no reasonable way to do that right now in the public cloud. And we can differentiate if it's your application or the network. The public cloud is very, very good at buffering traffic. That means latency. They don't drop traffic, but they'll buffer it into next year.
Yep.
And then the last one is security ops. We're not a security solution per se. We're a visibility solution. And that visibility is seeing applications and protocols. To this day, network and security people don't know what's on the network, right? And
Mhm.
with us doing deep packet inspection with our broad lateral footprint, we're able to see SSH conversations between workloads. We're able to see applications on non-standard ports. We're able to see shadow IT, crypto mining, expired certificates. And this is just visibility. Now, it has huge overlap with security. And if you're big on MITRE ATT&CK, there's a whole section or sub technique on non-standard port usage. And if you look on those 41 state level threat actors, 51 threat forensics reports, they all use standard apps and protocols on non-standard ports to navigate the network, and not once was it detected on the network except by the next-gen firewall as it leaves on egress or by the EDR during a forensics investigation. And that's something, a level of visibility we can help with.
I would also consider the cost aspect, especially in the cloud. Gigamon and on the physical environment, Gigamon can reduce the spend and the future spend of hardware and cloud costs by running some of our technologies. We have various types of calculators that can help you understand how much you would save if you choose to engage
Awesome.
that.
Okay, so some great arguments to take forward for anyone out there that needs to carry on. And hey, a reminder that you are going to get this entire webinar as an on demand, so you could just send them the webinar. Hey, watch this, and you'll be totally sold. I'm going to keep going with questions here as we're getting low on time, but I want to make sure we get to as many as we can. Actually, you know what? I'm going to start with this one here. For decryption, does Gigamon support TLS 1.3?
The short answer is yes.
Great.
So please contact us to figure out how, but yes, we can do that. And of course, if it's the pre-encryption, then it doesn't matter.
Matthew, anything that you wanted to add? Easy yes.
Uh,
It's long, it's
easy yes and
complicated, there's some things involved.
There's more conversation to be had, but yes is the key takeaway here. We also got a couple of questions coming in around being a smaller organization and making sure that this is something that makes sense for them to consider. Was there anything that you would say to a small company out there?
In the cloud, small companies can be huge. In the cloud, it could be a good solution for you if you need the kind of visibility that cloud native tools don't really offer, along the performance track and the application visibility track. We tend to be medium to large enterprise when it comes to the packet broker because the nervous system works better, on larger deployments and infrastructures.
Nice. I like.
yeah, I'd add to that by saying that with the on-premise virtual environments and the cloudy environments, it's licensing is based on volume, so it will automatically right size to the size of the organization. And on the physical side, we do have appliances that fit small use cases very well.
Yeah, I feel I should amend that. We do have a number of smaller appliances coming out for satellite offices that would work well for small offices as well.
So lots of options. But you know what? I also like where you started, Steve. I think, small businesses can be big in the cloud. Sometimes that it isn't
Hmm.
about the size of your.
Yeah,
I think sometimes people get a little worried about if they have
that's
small
true.
teams and they don't have a lot of people to monitor. But especially when you're talking about visibility, I mean, ideally you're kind of helping streamline that anyways, and reducing the resources that you would need to gain that visibility if you didn't have a tool like Gigamon.
Yeah, we can grab traffic from anywhere, send it to any tool, or do some analysis on it ourselves.
Amazing. And there's no other limitations that you would want the audience to be aware of in terms of, existing infrastructure in their team, multi-cloud, public cloud, private cloud, everything's all good?
I mean, I've worked a lot of orgs, and I've seen some really well-run ones, and I've seen some that were on the verge of collapse every day. So I where you are. So of course, there's always, limitations to caveats, but that's a case-by-case basis, right?
Perfect. So some conversations to be had, and certainly to reach out and carry that forward. We are getting pretty close to the end of time here, so I am going to start to wrap things up. But before we go, I do want to give you guys, I'm going to ask you two quick last questions. The first one is that I'd like to know if somebody would like to start these conversations, wants to learn a little bit more. We've already talked about, we've got our documents in the handouts tab, so there's some great follow-ups right there. But in terms of, getting in touch with Gigamon and carrying this conversation forward, what would you recommend as the first step?
I mean, the chatbot on our webpage is really good, and I hate to say that, but it is, and it'll route you to the right people that you need to speak to, if you don't have any pre-existing contact.
Perfect. Okay, I like that. And then here's my final question for you both, and I'm going to ask you both to wrap us up with a grand finale thought. Lots of pressure here. And what I'm wondering is if you sort of had one final takeaway and one thing that you would like the audience to walk away from this conversation, either understanding or spend a little more time with in their day, what would that one kind of key takeaway or thought be?
Well, the one I like to always drive home, and it's not necessarily what we're most famous for, and that's adding application metadata visibility to network logs. We make network logs application aware, because right now logging has kind of needs to grow and evolve to the next level. And not only do I need to log a conversation, I need to know if it's SSH, I need to know if it's TLS, I need to know what more information, and that's mostly lacking in the entirety of the industry.
I was going to say the exact same thing, except I was going to give it a cloud focus. You're so right about this. It's not just the, are you going to rely on the cloud to tell you what the application is that's running around when you're getting telemetry from the cloud? Because they're hiding, they're changing the ports. There's no application awareness. It's just like, oh, it's running on port 443.
It must be web traffic.
Well, Gigamon can tell you what's really running on that port, and you can add that with your flow logs. So instead of just having flow logs, you can have super flow logs that really work for security. So thanks for bringing that up, Stephen.
I feel we should have one of those moments where you can do this and have like an S super flow log, right?
Super flow log. That's why I'm not in charge of marketing.
I'm a recovering engineer, and clearly I'm not doing that bad here.
I haven't recovered yet.
Recovering engineer. Oh, I'm using that. Okay, well, guys, I have to say, I wish we could keep going. We are going to have to leave it there. Now, there was a lot of questions that we didn't get to, so we're going to make sure that those get sent onto your team so that you guys can get back to everyone out there and make sure that they get some answers back. I really want to thank you both for being here with us. It has been a sparkling exploration of plumbing through to nervous systems and everything in between. And I have really enjoyed this. I know the audience has as well. So thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thanks, Jess. Thanks for having us. Thanks for attending, everybody.
Thanks, Jess.
All right, and now it's time for all of you out there to do a little bit of homework. Our speakers just gave us a lot of interesting information and lots of cool takeaways. And now we're wondering if you have a follow-up that would be really helpful for you. So I do want to remind you all that in the handouts tab, you can find some of the documents. And Steve was mentioning that accelerating the M-21-31 logging maturity with Gigamon, the deep observability pipeline. And that is a great thing to download right away, as well as that opportunity to read a little bit more about eliminating the biggest blind spot with precryption. So please do go and check those out. Make sure you've got those handouts. But there's lots of other ways. And right at the end there, Steve and Matthew and I were talking a little bit about some things that might require some follow-up conversations that might be a little specific to your organization, to your industry, to your needs. And I think those conversations are really important to be having. Ideally, you want to have them before it's a panic, right? Before you realize that maybe you're not hitting the compliance goals that you had in mind, or you're not on the timeline that you wanted to be for those goals. So if there's any concern at all, if you're not sure about that, now is the time to reach out and connect with Gigamon and make sure that you're having that conversation early on so that you're not waiting until you're panicked. It's like we talked about at the beginning, right? This is like taxes. You don't want to wait until the deadline has already passed before you're calling the IRS or whatever your local tax organization is, wherever you're joining us from, and you're trying to ask those questions now that you've missed the deadline. So make sure you are reaching out to Gigamon. Click on that wish list right now and let them know how they can follow up with you. While you're doing that, while you're clicking on the handouts, I will also give away a prize. We have a $250 Amazon gift card that we will be giving away to someone who is here live, present, and lucky at the webinar with us today. And that special live, present, lucky someone is Steve Rutkowski from Pennsylvania. Steve Rutkowski from Pennsylvania, congratulations. We will follow up with you after we wrap, so stay tuned for that $250 Amazon gift card coming your way. All right, and with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to once again thank Gigamon for making this webinar possible, especially to our incredible speakers here with us today, Steve and Matthew. You have given us so much to think about. And of course, as Steve and Matthew mentioned at the end of our chat there, the big thank you goes to all of you out there for joining us. I very much appreciate that you took time out of your day to come and join us and have this conversation. It was a very practical conversation. I promised you it would also be fun. I hope we hit that a little bit today as well. I'm sure you enjoyed it. I had a great time. We were putting the fun back in compliance. That was our goal of the day today, and I'm hoping that we met that for you. And I hope that you're feeling a little bit more prepared and terms of setting your organization up for success when it comes to M-21-31 compliance. Again, I know these things can be a little overwhelming or a little not fun to think about, and this is where we win, right? We put a little bit of thought in before we're stressed so that we don't have to think about it when we are stressed. So kudos to all of you, high fives to all of you for joining and participating in this conversation today. It was an absolute blast, and I hope that you're feeling a little bit more ready, a little bit calmer, a little bit more prepared for those conversations that you're having in your organization. Well, thanks to all of you. I look forward to seeing you all on a webinar again soon. And until then, have an absolutely beautiful end to your day.